There are days when the soul feels tired, even if the body keeps moving. You wake up with the weight of something invisible pressing on your chest. Not quite pain, not quite sadness, just a quiet heaviness. As if you're carrying a burden you can't name and no one else can see. It's the weight of trying to fix, to prove, to hold it all together when inside you're falling apart like leaves in autumn. Sometimes it feels like you're trapped in a storm no one hears, raging behind a smile. A silent battle against life as it is, and life as you wish it could be. If this feels familiar, know that you're not alone. Truly, the Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." And perhaps this is where our journey begins, not by running, not by changing the world, but by pausing, by turning inward, by gently letting go of the war within. What if the peace you've been chasing isn't something to be found, but something to be uncovered? In this video, we'll explore the timeless wisdom of Buddhism, teachings that have guided countless hearts through darkness toward light. Together, we'll learn what it means to stop resisting and finally begin living, even when life is messy, imperfect, and uncertain. So, take a moment, breathe, let this be a soft place to land. And if something in these words touches your heart, I invite you to share one feeling you're holding today in the comments. Sometimes, the simple act of being seen is where healing begins. Let's begin. In stillness, in honesty, in peace. Part 1. Acceptance is understanding impermanence. There's a silent moment between resistance and surrender, a moment where the heart pauses, the breath softens, and the truth of things begins to shimmer through. It is in that sacred pause that acceptance is born, not as a resignation, not as giving up, but as a gentle bow to the truth that all things arise and pass away. Impermanence, anicca, is not just a teaching of the Buddha, it is the very rhythm of existence. To accept life is to move in harmony with this rhythm, to no longer grip tightly what must eventually fall away. From the earliest discourses, the Buddha spoke of impermanence as the gateway to liberation. He pointed to the flickering flame, the falling leaves, the shifting clouds, and even the breath, appearing, disappearing, and asked his followers to see clearly, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Dhammapada, verse 277. And yet how difficult it is for the modern heart to truly accept. There is a deep and quiet suffering in our longing for things to remain as they are, for relationships to last, for success to stay, for the body not to age, for love not to change. This resistance is subtle. It disguises itself as ambition, control, hope, even love. But underneath, it is fear. Fear of the falling apart. Fear of being left behind. Fear of death, not just of the body, but of all the identities and attachments we've gathered along the way. To accept is to release that fear. Not by denying it, but by holding it with tenderness and looking deeper. The woman who clings to a fading love, the man who cannot forgive the past, the child who resents change, they are not broken. They are simply longing for something lasting in a world where everything flows. Acceptance is not the absence of desire. It is the softening of that grip, the turning of the palm from closed to open. In Zen tradition, there's a story of a monk who carried a teacup everywhere he went. When asked why, he said, "This cup is already broken. I drink from it, and I love it. But I know one day it will fall, and so I treasure it without clinging." This is not pessimism, it is presence. When you accept that something is impermanent, you no longer postpone your love, you live fully, because you know this moment is all there is. How often do we suffer, not because something has ended, but because we refuse to accept that it had to. The job we lost, the person who walked away, the version of ourselves we can no longer be, these are not punishments. They are invitations. Every ending is a door. Every loss is a teacher in disguise. And acceptance is the key that unlocks the deeper meaning behind it all. But to accept impermanence is not to become cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it makes you more tender, more awake. You begin to savor the little things, the sunlight on a wall, the voice of a friend, the quiet sound of your own breath before sleep. You realize nothing is owed, and everything is a gift. Life stops being something to conquer and becomes something to bow to with gratitude. And perhaps most importantly, when you truly accept impermanence, you begin to accept yourself. The changing moods, the unhealed wounds, the parts of you that are still learning how to love. All of it is in flux. There is no fixed self, just waves arising and passing in the ocean of awareness. Why then do you hold yourself to impossible standards? Why judge what is still unfolding? The Buddha did not ask us to be perfect. He asked us to see clearly, to understand that clinging brings suffering, and that freedom lies not in controlling life, but in flowing with it. Acceptance, then, is not passive. It is the beginning of awakening. It is the clarity to stop resisting and start responding, not from fear, but from wisdom. So the next time you feel that inner tightness, the push against reality, ask yourself gently, what if I allowed this, just as it is, not forever, just for now? What would happen if you stopped trying to fix the moment and instead rested in its presence? Can you see the beauty, not in what could be, but in what already is? Because sometimes the most radical form of healing is simply this: to say, yes, this too, and in that yes to remember, nothing lasts, and yet everything matters. So tell me, what are you still resisting that life is asking you to accept? Part 2. Letting go is freedom from attachment. There is a hidden weight many carry without knowing. It's not visible like a burden across the shoulders, but it shapes every step, every breath, every decision. That weight is attachment, to outcomes, to identities, to stories long outgrown. And the curious thing is, the tighter we hold, the more life slips through our fingers like water. In the teachings of the Buddha, attachment, upadana, is one of the central roots of suffering. It is not love, nor care, nor presence. It is the insistence that things be a certain way. It is the clenched fist that tries to shape reality into a personal design. And when life doesn't comply, as it rarely does, suffering blooms like fire from dry grass. Letting go, in this light, is not the act of pushing something away. It is the sacred practice of no longer clinging. The hand opens, the heart softens, the need to control fades like mist under morning sun, and what remains is not a void, but a vastness. Space for peace, space for clarity, space for the real self to breathe. The Buddha once offered a simple image: a man crossing a river on a raft. The raft saves him, carries him across the dangerous current. But when he reaches the other shore, should he continue to carry the raft on his back? No, the raft was useful, but it is not meant to be clung to. In the same way, our beliefs, our roles, even our relationships, all can serve us. But when they no longer serve liberation, we must learn to release them. What many mistake as failure or loss is often just this life asking you to put the raft down. Letting go may seem like abandonment, but true abandonment is when we desert the present moment to dwell in illusion. Clinging to the past is a refusal to meet the present with honesty. Worrying over the future is an escape from what is. Both are veils, hiding the fullness of now. So the question becomes, what are you holding on to that is holding you back? a resentment left unspoken, an identity you've outgrown. The idea that healing should have happened faster than it did. The illusion that if you try just a little harder, life will finally match the picture in your head. But life does not move by our design, it moves by its own rhythm. And when we let go of our grip, we don't lose control, we gain flow. Like a leaf drifting on a quiet stream, we find that surrender doesn't mean drowning, it means trusting the current. There's a Zen tale of a young monk who asked the master, "How can I be free?" The master replied, "Drop it." The student, confused, said, "Drop what?" The master answered, "Whatever you are holding." Letting go is that simple. Not easy, but simple. It starts not with the thing itself, but with the awareness of how tightly we're holding it. That awareness is like a candle in a dark room. It doesn't burn the room down. It simply reveals what's already there. And in that light, the choice becomes visible. You don't have to drop everything. You only need to stop gripping what is already leaving. Sometimes the pain we feel is not from the loss itself, but from the refusal to release. Like holding on to thorns, convinced they are roses. There is a soft courage in letting go. It does not shout, it doesn't fight, it breathes, it whispers, "I trust the unfolding." And in that trust, a new kind of strength emerges, not brittle like control, but flexible like bamboo in the wind. Letting go is not a punishment. It is a kindness to yourself, to others, to the truth. Because in letting go, we create space for something deeper to arrive. Not more things to possess, but more presence, more breath, more peace. And here too, we find compassion for others and for ourselves. When we realize how tightly we've all been clinging to ideas of who we should be, to the roles we're expected to play, to the wounds we never asked for, we begin to soften toward one another. We stop blaming, we stop judging, we start understanding. So if you find yourself tired, restless, heavy, ask gently, what am I still trying to carry that no longer belongs to me? Perhaps it's a version of yourself you no longer need. Perhaps it's a dream that turned into a cage. Or perhaps it's simply the illusion that letting go means losing something, when in fact it may be how you find yourself again. The wind does not cling to the tree, the river does not hold the stone, and the sky does not possess the clouds. All things move, and that movement is life. So what will you release today, so that you may return to yourself? Part 3. Pain is a teacher, not an enemy. Somewhere along the winding path of life, we were taught to fear pain. We were told it is a sign of something gone wrong, a signal to retreat, an error to be corrected. And so we brace against it, tensing, turning away, numbing, distracting. But in the Dharma, pain is not cast as the enemy. It is seen as a teacher, a stern one perhaps, but one that always points us back to truth, if we are willing to sit still and listen. In the Buddha's first sermon, the turning of the Dharma wheel, he did not begin with bliss or transcendence. He began with suffering. The first noble truth, dukkha, exists. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Parting from what we love is suffering. Not getting what we want is suffering. And yet, this was not a pessimistic statement. It was a doorway, because to see suffering clearly is to begin to free ourselves from its grip. What we resist persists. This is as true in emotional life as it is in the teachings of karma. When pain is avoided, it grows stronger in the shadows, but when it is turned toward, felt fully, and understood, it begins to dissolve. Not necessarily because the sensation disappears, but because our relationship to it transforms. The woman grieving the loss of her mother, the man ashamed of his mistakes, The child lonely in a crowd of people. These are not broken beings, they are simply human, and their pain is not a flaw. It is a signal that something within them is calling for presence, not escape. There is a Zen story of a master who asked his student, "When a painful thought arises, what do you do?" The student replied, "I fight it with positive thinking." The master shook his head and said, "No, invite it in, pour it tea, ask it what it came to show you." This is the path of mindfulness, sati. Not to fix or flee, but to witness. When you sit with your pain in silence, without judgment, it slowly shifts form. It may begin as fire, but if you breathe with it, it becomes light. It may begin as tightness, but if you stay, it opens like a knot, untangling in warm hands. Pain is not here to punish you. It is here to awaken you, to the places within still bound in fear, still longing for love, still carrying stories unexamined. And in this way, pain is not an obstacle to your practice. It is the practice. When your heart breaks, it breaks open, not closed. And through those cracks, something sacred seeps in: humility, compassion, depth. The same hands that once tried to push pain away now learn to hold it, gently, as one would a frightened bird. No forcing, no fixing, just presence. And this presence is everything. In the light of pure awareness, pain loses its sting, not because it vanishes, but because it is no longer mistaken for who you are. You are not your sadness. You are not your fear. You are the space in which these things arise and fall. You are the quiet witness, the sky in which the storm moves but never stays. Sometimes, the most powerful shift in practice is to stop asking, "How do I get rid of this pain?" and start asking, "What is this pain trying to teach me?" Maybe it's teaching patience, or reminding you of a boundary, or inviting you to grieve what has not yet been grieved. Or maybe it's simply asking for your attention, full, tender, undivided. The lotus, so central in Buddhist symbolism, grows from mud, not from clarity, not from sunshine, but from darkness and dirt. And it is precisely because of this origin that its bloom is so profound. In the same way, your pain is the mud from which your compassion can bloom for yourself, for others, for the fragile, impermanent dance of all things. Pain, when accepted, becomes a bridge to empathy, to depth, to presence, but pain resisted becomes a wall, isolating, hardening, confusing. The choice is not whether or not you will experience pain. The choice is, will you resist it or receive it? You may be tempted to run, to keep busy, to chase happiness like a cure, but happiness built on the denial of suffering is always fragile. True peace arises not from avoidance, but from integration. When you can hold both joy and sorrow in the same breath, without clinging to either, that is freedom. So if pain is visiting you now, emotional, physical, silent, or screaming, perhaps don't chase it away too quickly. Sit with it, pour it tea, let it speak. And in that space, notice, is it softening? Is it showing you something? Is it in its own strange way trying to bring you back to yourself? What if the thing you've been trying hardest to avoid is the very doorway into your awakening? Part 4. Peace is found in surrender, not control. We live in a world that reveres control. We are taught to master our schedules, our emotions, our careers, even our spiritual paths. To be in control is to be powerful, they say, and yet quietly, many are exhausted. Beneath the surface of all the planning, fixing, and striving is a mind in constant tension, trying to predict, protect, and prepare for what might happen next. But peace, in its true and lasting form, does not arise from control. It arises from surrender. The Buddha often spoke of dukkha, the suffering born not from pain itself, but from our resistance to it. He said, "Let go of what is not yours. Your clinging is your suffering." The mind, like a hand grasping sand, tightens around things, around people, outcomes, even beliefs. But the tighter we hold, the more life slips through our fingers. Control feels safe, but it is a prison built of fear. Surrender, in the Buddhist sense, is not defeat. It is alignment. It is the recognition that life has its own rhythm, mysterious, ever-shifting, and not always understandable to the limited mind. When we surrender, we are not giving up our agency. We are stepping out of resistance and into participation. We begin to dance rather than struggle with the unfolding of life. There's a story from the Zen tradition. A student was frustrated with the unpredictability of his spiritual path. He told his teacher, "I try to control my thoughts, but they keep coming back. I try to force my mind into peace, but it rebels." The teacher simply smiled and said, "Trying to calm your mind is like trying to smooth water with your hand. Leave it alone, and it will settle on its own." Control is often a disguised form of fear. The fear that if we let go, everything will fall apart. But more often, it is in the letting go that things finally fall into place. Surrender is an act of trust, not blind faith, but a quiet confidence that there is wisdom moving through life greater than our preferences. And in that surrender, something remarkable happens. The mind, once filled with tension, begins to soften. The breath becomes fuller. The heart, once guarded, begins to open. You stop fighting the moment, and the moment embraces you. Peace arrives, not because life has been tamed, but because you are no longer at war with it. Control says, "I will find peace when everything goes according to plan." Surrender says, "I will find peace by being present with what is, even when it does not follow my plan." One is conditional, the other is unconditional. Which one sounds more free? Even the breath teaches us this. Try to hold it too long, and you will suffer. Try to control its rhythm, and it becomes strained. But when you simply observe it, in, out, it becomes a teacher of impermanence, of trust, of effortless being. The breath surrenders, and in that, it sustains life. In Buddhism, we call this flowing with the Dharma, not resisting the natural law of things. Everything arises, dwells for a time, and fades. To control is to fight that reality. To surrender is to merge with it. And this is where true stillness lies, not in the silence of an undisturbed life, but in the acceptance of life as it is. Surrender is also the ground of compassion. When you stop needing life to conform to your image, you begin to see others more clearly. You stop judging their struggles because you recognize your own. You stop demanding perfection because you have tasted the grace of letting go. The heart that has surrendered becomes spacious enough to hold the world. You may still make choices, you may still take action, but now your action flows not from reactivity, but from wisdom and clarity. Like a skilled archer, you draw the bow not in haste, but in calm. Your stillness becomes your power. So the next time life doesn't go the way you wanted, pause, feel the urge to fix, to fight, to flee, and then ask, what if I simply let go? What if I trusted this moment, even if I don't understand it? Notice the softening in your chest. Notice the breath returning. This is surrender, not the end of effort, but the beginning of alignment. In the deepest sense, to surrender is to remember. You are not separate from life. You are not above it. You are not behind it. You are life itself. And when you remember that, the need to control fades like smoke, and peace, quietly, returns home. So, beloved listener, are you willing, even for a moment,
to stop steering the river and allow yourself to float.
Part 5. True self-acceptance is the root of transformation. In the quiet corners of the heart, beyond all striving and self-judgment, there is a longing not to become someone else, but to simply be, to rest in one's own being without fear or comparison. And yet how often that longing is buried beneath layers of self-improvement, masked as the pursuit of growth, but secretly fed by shame. In the teachings of the Buddha, transformation does not begin with rejection. It begins with recognition, with the radical gentleness of self-acceptance. The Buddha never asked his followers to become someone else. He did not preach perfection. Instead, he encouraged a deep, honest seeing. Come and see for yourself. This was not a command to strive endlessly, but an invitation to turn inward, to observe clearly, not with criticism, but with compassion. To accept yourself does not mean you resign to your habits or justify your harmful patterns. Rather, it means you stop fighting with your own becoming. You begin to see yourself not as a problem to fix, but as a process to witness. Just as a lotus blooms not by forcing its petals open, but by unfolding according to its nature, so too does the human spirit heal and grow best in conditions of warmth, not harshness. So many carry the weight of self-rejection, the idea that they are not enough until they are healed, successful, enlightened, or transformed. But self-acceptance is not the end of the journey. It is the soil in which real transformation takes root. Without it, every effort to grow is tinged with violence toward the self. There is an old story about a monk who spent years trying to purify his mind, only to be tormented by thoughts of anger and unworthiness. He went to his master in despair, saying, "I am failing. These thoughts should not be here." The master looked at him and said gently, "Do not try to destroy your mind. Befriend it, let it speak. Then listen with kindness." And in that moment the monk began to cry, not from weakness, but from relief. He had been given permission to be human. When we meet ourselves as we are, with all our contradictions, our unpolished emotions, our unfinished healing, we make space for something sacred to emerge. Not the polished version of ourselves we think we must become, but the real, breathing, feeling being that is here now. That being doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be met. Acceptance means sitting with your sadness without trying to cheer it up. It means allowing your anxiety to tremble without calling it a failure. It means holding your anger not as an enemy, but as a messenger asking to be understood. When we stop turning against our own emotions, they soften. They become less like storms and more like weather, passing, shifting, harmless, when met with shelter and warmth. In Buddhist psychology, this is the beginning of metta, loving kindness, not only for others, but for yourself. The path begins not with conquering, but with caring, not with purging darkness, but with lighting a candle, and choosing to stay with what arises. Self-acceptance is also the end of comparison. It says, "This is my path," with its own timing, its own rhythm, its own flavor of awakening. You stop measuring your pace by another's, and in doing so, you begin to trust your own unfolding. And slowly, something begins to change, not from pressure, but from presence. You eat a little more mindfully. You speak with more care. You pause before reacting. These small acts of attention are not efforts to earn worthiness. They are natural expressions of self-respect. You don't yell at a flower to grow faster. You give it sunlight, water, and patience. Why then do you speak so harshly to yourself? Every time you pause and choose gentleness over judgment, you are watering the seed of your own awakening. So let the inner critic rest. Let it sit at the edge of the garden while you return to the center where your true nature awaits. Not perfect, not complete, but already worthy. You don't need to become anything more to be loved. You only need to be here, fully, honestly, and tenderly. The transformation will happen, not through force, but through remembering who you are beneath the layers, a stillness, a presence, a light that has never gone out. And so, the real question is not, how do I fix myself, but can I love myself in this moment, as I am, and let that love be the beginning of change. Part 6. Stillness is the ground where wisdom grows. In a world that constantly urges motion, forward, upward, outward, there is something quietly revolutionary about stillness. It is not inaction, nor laziness, nor a retreat from responsibility. Stillness, in the Buddhist tradition, is a sacred turning inward. It is the moment when the surface of the mind stops rippling and the depth of clarity is revealed beneath. If peace is the fruit, stillness is the root. And if wisdom is the flower, stillness is the soil where it takes seed. The Buddha himself found awakening, not in action, but in immobility, beneath the Bodhi tree, seated in unwavering stillness, breathing, watching, being. It was not in fleeing suffering, nor in fighting the mind, that he discovered truth. It was by stopping completely, letting the winds of karma blow, but not being moved by them. Be still and know, the teaching seemed to whisper, for in stillness all things are revealed. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the freedom from being tossed around by thought. It is the spacious awareness in which even the wildest emotions can arise and fall without disturbance. Like a vast sky that remains untouched by the storm clouds that pass through it, stillness holds everything without judgment. And yet, stillness is perhaps one of the most difficult states to cultivate because it requires us to do nothing, to stop running, fixing, scrolling, proving. It is in stillness that all our internal noise begins to rise, the discomfort we've been avoiding, the grief we've postponed, the fear we've buried beneath busyness. But this is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of opening. As one Zen master said, when the pond is stirred, you cannot see the bottom, but if you leave it alone, even the mud will settle and the truth will appear. Stillness does not bring peace. It reveals that peace was always there, hidden beneath the surface, beneath the stories, beneath the need to become. In meditation we practice this stillness, sitting, breathing, not chasing anything. The thoughts continue, the body itches, the emotions dance, and yet something remains still beneath it all. That something is your true nature. Not the thinker, not the doer, but the witness, the quiet presence that does not flinch, the one that has always been there, quietly watching the unfolding of your life. When you begin to recognize this stillness as your home, something changes in the way you move through the world. You stop rushing for meaning. You stop chasing completion. You stop reacting with such urgency to every shift in emotion or circumstance, not because you've become passive, but because you are rooted. Wisdom does not grow in noise. It flowers in silence. When the mind settles, insight arises, not as a result of calculation, but as a natural consequence of presence. You begin to see clearly, and in that clarity, you respond rather than react. You speak more truthfully. You listen more deeply. You act from a place not of fear or desire, but of knowing. In the Abhidhamma, the great Buddhist psychology, stillness of mind, samatha, is paired with insight, vipassana. One calms the waters, the other reveals the depth. Together they create the conditions for liberation. But it begins not with striving, but with a single pause. So perhaps today you might ask, When was the last time I sat without reaching for anything? When was the last time I allowed silence to be not a void, but a teacher? The invitation of stillness is always available. It doesn't require a retreat in the mountains or hours of meditation. It may be found in a single mindful breath, in the quiet moments between thoughts, in the gaze that sees without needing to judge. And in that stillness, you may find that the questions you've been asking, who am I? What should I do? Where is peace? Do not need immediate answers, because in that spacious silence, you remember you are not lost. You are simply being asked to stop, to be, to listen, and to trust that wisdom blooms in its own time, like a lotus unfolding with the morning sun. So, beloved listener, will you allow yourself to stop, not because you've reached the end, but because the next step can only arise from quiet ground?
Part 7. Compassion begins with yourself. There's a soft ache that many people carry, a quiet, unspoken belief that they must earn their worth, that to be loved, they must be perfect, that to be respected, they must always be strong. And so they give and give, offering kindness to others while silently starving themselves of the very same tenderness. But in the teachings of the Buddha, compassion is not something to be performed outwardly while neglecting inward wounds. True compassion, karuda, begins where all healing begins, with yourself. When the Buddha taught the 4 immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, he did not say to give them only to others. He began with the self. In metta bhavana, the practice of loving kindness meditation, the first phrase is always directed inward. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. It is not a selfish act. It is a recognition that unless the heart is full, it cannot overflow. Still, for many, self-compassion feels awkward. The mind says, I haven't done enough yet. I made too many mistakes. I don't deserve kindness. But these voices are echoes of old wounds, remnants of cultural expectations, inner critics, and unloved parts of ourselves. They are not the truth. They are the chains. And self-compassion is the key. To practice compassion for yourself does not mean to excuse all your behavior or pretend you have no faults. It means to meet your faults with honesty and care, rather than shame. Just as you would comfort a crying child who doesn't yet know better, you learn to hold your own trembling heart with patience, not punishment. There is a Zen teaching that says, the most important person in your life is the one you are with now, and in this moment, that person is you. You are the one breathing, the one feeling, the one carrying burdens that no one else may see. To abandon yourself in this moment would be the greatest cruelty. To stay, even if just for a breath, is an act of sacred friendship. Sometimes we believe that being hard on ourselves will make us stronger, that criticism will drive improvement. But the Dharma reminds us what you water grows. If you water your inner world with shame, you may achieve, but you will do so with a hungry, aching spirit. If you water it with compassion, your growth will be steady, deep and sustainable, like roots reaching gently into the earth. Consider the Bodhisattva, the being who chooses to stay in the world not for personal gain, but out of love for all beings. That path does not begin with grandeur. It begins with the willingness to sit with your own suffering, to touch it with tenderness, and to allow that tenderness to ripple outward into the lives of others. Because when you know how it feels to hurt, and to be held in that hurt, you will never again look at someone else's pain with judgment. Your compassion becomes real, not theoretical, not performative, but deeply embodied. You don't offer platitudes, you offer presence.
because you've offered it to yourself first. This is not always easy. It takes courage to turn toward your own suffering, to face the shame, the regret, the disappointment. But in doing so, you become trustworthy to yourself and to others. You learn to walk with your wounds, not in denial, but in dignity. And gradually, something shifts. You stop rushing to fix yourself. You stop demanding that your healing meet a deadline. You start listening, not to the noise of expectation, but to the quiet wisdom of your own heart. And the heart says, "Even now, I am worthy of kindness." So today, if you feel lost or tired or undeserving, pause, place a gentle hand on your chest. Feel the warmth there, and ask, "Can I be kind to myself? Just for this breath, just for this moment?" Because that single breath of compassion may be what opens the door to a new way of being, one rooted not in punishment, but in peace. And if you're wondering where to begin, begin here. May I be held, may I be forgiven, may I remember that this too is part of being human. After all, if you cannot offer love to yourself, how will you ever believe it when someone else tries to offer it to you?
Part 8. The ego seeks separation. The soul recognizes unity. There is a voice within that constantly compares, measures, and divides. It asks, "Am I better or worse, ahead or behind, right or wrong?" It watches others not with curiosity, but with unease. It demands identity, affirmation, achievement. This voice is the ego, not in the modern sense of arrogance, but in the Buddhist sense of the illusion of separateness. It is the voice that whispers, "I am alone, I must defend, I must prove." The Buddha called this illusion of separateness attavada, the belief in a fixed self, apart from the rest of the world. And he taught that this belief is one of the core fetters binding us to suffering. Because when we believe we are separate, we fear loss. We fear not being enough. We fear being unseen, unloved, untouched. And from this fear, the mind builds endless stories about who we are, who we should be, and how far we are from being whole. The ego thrives in this division. It cannot rest, because its survival depends on agitation, a constant striving to become someone, somewhere, somehow. But no matter how much the ego gains, it always fears it is not enough. It feeds on control and judgment. And when things fall apart, as all things eventually do, it panics. Because its world is made of mirrors, not ground. The soul, however, that quiet, steady presence beneath the noise, does not fear, it does not strive. It simply is. It recognizes not separation, but interbeing, the truth that all things arise together, that we are not isolated drops, but waves in the same ocean. The soul breathes in unity the way the earth drinks in sunlight, effortlessly, silently, without needing to claim it. There is a Zen koan that asks, "Show me the face you had before your parents were born." It is a question that cannot be answered with the ego. It points to something deeper, the timeless awareness that exists before identity, before story, before I and mine. In moments of stillness you may touch this space, walking in nature, sitting in silence, holding a loved one's hand without words. Suddenly, the boundaries dissolve. There is no observer and observed, only being. These moments are fleeting, but they are real, and they point to the truth that the self we defend so fiercely was never as solid as we believed. When you begin to shift from ego to essence, something changes. You stop needing to win. You stop needing others to lose. You stop needing the world to validate your worth. You simply carry your presence, open, curious, unguarded. And that presence is magnetic, not because it seeks attention, but because it radiates peace. The shift from ego to soul
is not a war, it is a remembrance. You don't destroy the ego, you simply stop believing it is the whole truth. You start watching its patterns, the envy, the defensiveness, the subtle pride, without becoming entangled. You notice them rise and fall like wind through the grass, and you remain steady. This does not mean you become indifferent or passive, quite the opposite. It means your actions begin to emerge from a deeper place, not from proving, but from presence, not from fear, but from connection. You begin to speak more gently. You begin to listen more deeply. You begin to see others not as threats or competitors, but as reflections of the same luminous essence. You're rediscovering in yourself, and in that space, compassion flows easily. Judgment loses its edge. There is room for complexity, for contradiction, for growth. You stop needing to explain yourself, because you are no longer at war with your own becoming. So perhaps the question is not, how do I become someone better, but rather, who am I when I stop believing I am separate? When you no longer see yourself as a solitary wave, but part of the vast breathing ocean, because the deeper truth is this: you were never alone, you were never other, you were never outside the dance. You just forgot for a while. So, beloved listener, will you pause, just for a moment, and feel what connects you to everything you once thought was not you?
Part 9. You don't rise by climbing. You rise by releasing. In the modern world, the word rise is often accompanied by images of ladders, towers, mountain peaks. There is a common belief that to grow is to ascend, to accumulate more, to become more, to achieve more. Success, status, enlightenment, all appear as distant summits we must climb toward. And yet, in the quiet teachings of the Buddha, rising is rarely about reaching upward. It is about going inward, not climbing to become more, but releasing to remember what is already whole. The more we chase the idea of rising through achievement, the more we entangle ourselves in suffering. Because striving, if rooted in ego, is fueled by comparison, by fear, by the belief that we are incomplete. And no matter how high we climb externally, if we carry this inner belief of lack, the view will never satisfy. The Buddha saw this clearly. He renounced a palace, not to become poor, but to become free. He left behind status, not because he was ungrateful, but because he saw that true elevation happens not by adding layers, but by shedding them. Like the snake that must shed its old skin, we too must let go of the identities, attachments, and illusions that weigh us down. There is a Zen story of a young monk who asked his master, "How do I become enlightened?" The master replied, "Who is it that is asking the question?" The monk was confused. The master continued, "When you no longer need to be someone, you will rise effortlessly, like a feather carried by the wind." We think rising means effort, more discipline, more action, more control. But often the deepest transformation arises when we stop pushing, when we stop trying to shape ourselves into a version we think the world will approve of, when we dare to sit still and feel the weight we've been carrying, the weight of perfectionism, of shame, of needing to prove ourselves. And in that stillness, something miraculous begins to happen. We start to drop the unnecessary, the old stories, the outdated roles, the tight armors. One by one they fall away, like autumn leaves gently releasing their branches, not because they failed, but because their time is complete. You don't need to climb to reach peace. Peace is not above you. It's beneath the rubble of everything you've been clinging to. Letting go is not losing. It is a return to center, to simplicity, to truth. The lotus again and again reminds us, it does not stretch toward the sky by force. It rises slowly from the mud, not because it resists the mud,
but because it accepts it as part of the journey. Its rise is organic, inevitable, born of depth, not height. You too are capable of such a rise. When you stop clinging to the idea of what your life should be, you begin to see the sacredness of what it already is. When you stop trying to outrun your past, you realize it has softened you in just the right places. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you begin to recognize the beauty of your own rhythm. And in this gentle unraveling, you become lighter. Not because you gained more, but because you carry less judgment, less tension, less story. And in that lightness, you rise. This kind of rising doesn't make noise. It doesn't shout its progress. It doesn't demand applause. It is quiet, subtle, like the dawn, unnoticed at first, then suddenly bathing everything in soft light. People may sense it, but they may not be able to name it. They'll say, "There's something different about you. You seem calm, clear, grounded," and you will smile. Not because you've risen above them, but because you've finally risen into yourself. So the question is no longer, how far can I go, but what can I let go of right now? Perhaps you don't need another achievement. Perhaps what your soul truly longs for is this: to sit beneath the Bodhi tree of your own being and exhale all the trying. Can you feel it? That soft invitation to rise, not by force, but by returning home. Part 10. You are the sky, not the storm. There are days when your inner world feels like a storm. The mind races, the heart aches. Emotions surge like crashing waves, and you wonder if peace is even possible. In those moments, it's easy to feel consumed, as though the turbulence inside defines you, as though you are the storm itself. But in Buddhist practice, we are reminded again and again, you are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. This is not metaphor alone. It is a profound shift in identity. The Buddha taught that clinging to thoughts, emotions, and sensations as self is one of the deepest roots of suffering. But when we begin to watch these inner weather patterns with mindful awareness, something astonishing happens. We realize that, like all things, these too arise and pass. Anger swells and fades. Fear tightens and then softens. Joy bubbles up and slips quietly away. None of them stay. None of them are you. The sky does not try to stop the storm. It doesn't resist the lightning or chase away the thunder. It simply holds it, vast, open, unshaken. In the same way, your awareness is not damaged by your emotions. It witnesses them. It breathes through them. It remains. This is the gift of mindfulness, sati. It gives us the space to see clearly without becoming entangled. When sadness arrives, we can say, "Sadness is here," instead of, "I am sad." One is identification, the other is observation. And in that tiny shift of language, a vast field of freedom opens. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha speaks of contemplating the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects, not as self, but as processes. He does not say, "Be your thoughts." He says, "Observe them, know them as they are." He urges us to develop a mind like a mirror, reflecting, not reacting. But this takes practice, it takes patience, and it takes immense kindness, because some storms are fierce, some clouds are heavy with old grief, buried memories, unmet wounds. When they arrive, it is tempting to push them away, to distract, deny, or drown them out. But avoidance only delays healing. It buries the pain deeper, where it festers. Instead, what if you sat with the storm, not to fix it, not to force it away, but to simply stay, breathing, grounded, witnessing? Over time, even the fiercest storm begins to shift, not because you defeated it, but because you allowed it to be held in your presence. There is a Zen practice known as shikantaza, just sitting, no mantra, no visualization, no goal, just being with what is. It is not easy, but it is powerful, because in that still sitting, you begin to see the waves rise and fall without pulling you under. You begin to trust the depth of your own sky. And when that trust deepens, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing your emotions. You stop believing that peace means the absence of chaos. Instead, you discover an inner refuge, a calm so steady, even the wildest winds cannot touch it. This does not mean you become numb or detached. On the contrary, it means you can now feel everything: joy, sorrow, rage, tenderness, without losing yourself. You become the compassionate witness. You become the silent ground of being that remains, no matter what moves through you. In a world addicted to reactivity, to noise, to constant movement, this is a radical act: to become still, to become vast, to no longer be ruled by every thought or emotion, to remember, again and again, this too shall pass. So the next time a storm brews inside, whether it's fear, doubt, or grief, pause, breathe, gently remind yourself, this is not who I am, this is weather. I am the sky. Let the storm come. Let it roar. But stay grounded in your true nature, spacious, luminous, clear, and then ask yourself, not with urgency, but with quiet wonder, if I am not the storm, what have I always been behind it?
Part 11. Allowing is not weakness, it is strength in stillness. There is a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed in this world. It does not speak loudly, does not clench its fists, does not race to fix or escape. It simply allows, and in that allowing, there is a power greater than resistance, greater than reaction, a power rooted not in force, but in presence. We are conditioned to believe that power comes from doing, from conquering problems, from overcoming emotions, from shaping our lives into neat, controllable forms. But the Buddha pointed to a different kind of mastery, one that arises not from domination, but from understanding. In the face of discomfort, he taught us to pause, to feel, to observe. This is the essence of upekkha, equanimity. Not indifference, but balance. Not apathy, but poise. Equanimity is the strength to remain still while the storm passes through. It is the ability to say, this too is part of the path, I will not run. When suffering arises, our first instinct is often to push it away, to silence the discomfort, to numb the pain, to rewrite the story so it sounds prettier. But allowing is something else entirely. It is a sacred act of non-resistance. It is sitting beside your sorrow and saying, you have a place here too. It is letting your grief breathe. It is letting your anger speak without letting it steer. This is not easy. To allow is to be intimate with vulnerability. To say yes to what the heart fears might break it. But within that yes is a profound strength. The kind that does not flinch. The kind that listens rather than fights. The kind that heals without needing to rush. There is a story from the Buddha's life that illustrates this perfectly. One day, a man approached him and began to insult him, calling him names, questioning his wisdom, challenging his calm. The Buddha listened quietly. When the man had finished, the Buddha asked, if someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong? The man was confused. To the one who offered it, of course. Exactly, the Buddha said. In the same way, I do not accept your anger. It remains yours. This was not cold detachment. It was deep allowing,
letting the man's aggression exist without absorbing it, without returning it, without resisting it, with more noise. The Buddha's strength came from his stillness. Allowing means you no longer need to control every thought or feeling. You don't suppress them. You simply let them arise, stay, and pass. Like waves on the ocean's surface, you remain the ocean, deep, calm, unmoved. And yet, this is often misunderstood. People may ask, if I allow my sadness, won't it consume me? If I allow my fear, won't I become weak? But the truth is, what you resist grows stronger. What you allow begins to lose its grip. The dragon that seemed terrifying in the dark becomes a tired shadow in the light of your presence. This practice is not passive. It requires immense courage. The courage to stay when everything inside you wants to flee. The courage to breathe through discomfort rather than react. The courage to sit in silence and let your truth speak, no matter how raw or inconvenient. Allowing also invites compassion. When you can sit with your own pain without judging it, you begin to hold others the same way. You become less reactive, less defensive. You create space for complexity, for contradiction, for the imperfect beauty of being human, and in that space, healing becomes possible. This is the strength the world truly needs. Not louder voices, not harder fists, but gentler hearts. Not more control, but more capacity to be with what is. So today, if something arises within you, a sadness, a tension, a memory, can you pause and let it be? Just for one breath, one moment of non-resistance, can you let go of the story that says, this should not be here, and whisper instead, I can hold this too? Because in that small shift, something powerful is born, a deeper presence, a clearer awareness, a peace that is not the absence of pain, but the freedom to sit with it and still know, I am whole. So I ask you, not as a challenge, but as a quiet invitation, what part of yourself is waiting simply to be allowed?
Part 12. Suffering is amplified by resistance, softened by presence. There is a truth that lives beneath all emotional pain, one that is often overlooked in the rush to escape it. That truth is simple. It is not the pain itself that crushes us. It is our resistance to it. The gripping, the bracing, the silent internal war. In the teachings of the Buddha, this insight is central. Suffering is not what happens to you. It is how the mind relates to what happens. The first noble truth is clear. Dukkha, suffering, exists. Birth, aging, loss, separation, uncertainty. These are woven into the very fabric of human life. But the second noble truth offers a subtle refinement. Suffering deepens when we cling, when we resist, when we demand that life be different than it is. Resistance is the second arrow, the one we fire into ourselves. The Buddha once told this exact parable. A man is struck by an arrow, but before it is removed, he demands to know who shot it, what kind of bow was used, what the arrow is made of. All the while, he bleeds. The lesson is not that questions are bad, but that delay born from resistance only compounds suffering. Instead of meeting the pain directly, we complicate it with stories, judgments, and blame. But what if, instead, we simply allowed it? To meet suffering with presence is not to celebrate it. It is to uncoil from it, to say, this hurts. Let me breathe with it. Let me feel the fire without feeding it. That breath is the beginning of freedom. Still, we are taught, often unknowingly, to flee discomfort, to distract, suppress, numb. But distraction is not liberation. It is postponement, and postponed pain does not disappear. It waits,
It shapes the contours of our choices, our relationships, our inner dialogue. It grows in the shadows. Presence, on the other hand, is a light, gentle, clear. When you sit with your pain, truly sit, you stop being its prisoner, you become its witness. You step out of the storm and into the space that watches the storm pass. And from that place, the grip of suffering loosens. A monk once said, "If you do not turn toward your suffering, you will continue to meet it on the outside, again and again, in new faces, in new forms." The invitation, then, is not to escape, but to enter the present moment more fully, with your whole being. This is the heart of mindfulness, not fixing, not explaining, just being. When you breathe mindfully with grief, it does not vanish, but it begins to flow. It no longer sits in your chest like a locked door. It becomes a stream, moving gently through you. And over time, it carries with it insights, the roots of your pain, the shape of your longing, the parts of yourself still asking to be seen. Presence reveals these things, but only when we stop fighting the moment. And this is what suffering often wants most, not to be solved, but to be witnessed, not to be buried, but to be honored. Even pain, when held in awareness, becomes something sacred, a messenger of unmet truth, an echo of something deeper, calling for love. So perhaps suffering is not a curse, but a call back to presence, a call to stop fleeing, to stop fixing, and to simply sit in the fire without panic. In that sitting, you begin to see clearly. This moment hurts, yes, but it is also alive, unfolding, full of teaching. A teacher once told his students, "You cannot remove the rain from the sky, but you can learn to walk in it without drowning." This is what presence offers, not the erasure of pain, but the capacity to hold it with dignity, with softness, and with spaciousness. The next time you feel overwhelmed by suffering, don't rush to replace it with positivity. Don't pressure yourself to find silver linings. Instead, pause, breathe, feel where the pain lives in your body. Ask it, what do you need right now? What are you trying to tell me? And then listen. Because in that listening, something ancient within you may stir, a knowing deeper than words, a stillness older than your pain. That stillness doesn't ask you to pretend, it only asks you to stay, to be with what is, to suffer less, not by changing the pain, but by changing your relationship with it. So I ask you gently, what would happen if you stopped pushing your suffering away and instead welcomed it home, like a guest who's been knocking for years, waiting only to be heard? Part 13. Let go of the story. Come back to the breath. The human mind is a storyteller, endlessly weaving, editing, and replaying tales of what was, what might be, and what should have been. These stories seem so convincing, full of villains and victims, missed chances and imagined futures. But beneath them, beneath the swirl of narrative and meaning, something much quieter is always waiting. The breath, the moment. The Buddha taught that the path to freedom begins not with more thinking, but with direct experience. In the Anapanasati Sutta, he instructed his disciples to anchor their awareness in the breath, in the rise and fall, the in and out, because the breath is always here, always honest, and always now. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. Nothing to prove, nothing to fix, just presence. And yet how often we leave this simplicity behind. The moment something difficult arises, an uncomfortable feeling, a sharp memory, a conflict, the mind immediately leaps into storytelling. It asks, why is this happening? Who caused this? What does this mean about me? It spins scenarios,
replays conversations, builds defenses, and in doing so, it pulls us out of the moment and into the maze. The stories themselves are not the problem. They are natural, human, but when we become identified with them, when we mistake them for the truth, we suffer. We lose the freshness of now, and we become trapped in a version of life, filtered through fear, judgment, or regret. The breath, however, tells a different story, one that is wordless and free. It does not care who was right or wrong. It does not cling to the past or reach for the future. It simply flows, rising, falling, like waves on a shore. When we return to the breath, we are not escaping life. We are returning to life as it is, without the veil of mental commentary. There is a Zen saying, when walking, just walk. When eating, just eat. It sounds simple, even naive, but this is the essence of mindfulness. To return to what you are actually doing, feeling, experiencing right now, without layering it with interpretation. This is not indifference, it is intimacy. When you eat with full presence, you taste more deeply. When you breathe with full awareness, you live more fully. Letting go of the story does not mean denying your pain. It means not becoming it. It means allowing your emotions to move through you like weather, real, powerful, but not personal. It means remembering you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts arise. There is a story of a wandering monk who asked a master, "What is the path to enlightenment?" The master replied, "Wash your bowl." The monk was puzzled. "That's all?" The master smiled. "Yes, when eating, eat. When washing, wash. When breathing, breathe. Enlightenment is not elsewhere. It is here, waiting in this very act." Letting go of the story is an act of compassion. It says, "I trust that I do not need to solve everything with the mind." It allows the body to soften, the nervous system to settle, the heart to open. In this space, clarity begins to emerge, not as an intellectual insight, but as a felt sense of being home. You don't have to believe everything the mind says. You don't have to follow every thread of thought. You can choose to pause, to return, to let the breath be your refuge. This is not passivity. This is wisdom. The wisdom that understands that truth lives in direct experience, not in mental construction. So the next time you find yourself tangled in story, replaying a moment, anticipating a loss, rehearsing a defense, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your chest rise and fall. Ask yourself, what is actually happening right now, outside the story? And return, again and again. Return, not because you failed, but because this is the path, not a straight line, but a continual remembering. And maybe, just maybe, in that returning, you will begin to feel a different kind of peace. Not the peace that comes from having all the answers, but the peace that comes from no longer needing them. So, beloved listener, what story are you ready to set down so you can finally hear the quiet wisdom of your breath? Part 14. Your inner climate is your true refuge. It is natural to seek comfort in the world, to want the sun to shine, the winds to calm, the days to unfold in harmony. But the truth, a quiet truth often whispered in the background of Buddhist teaching, is this: the world does not always bend to our longing. The outer weather will change, people will misunderstand, plans will unravel, storms will come. And so the question becomes not, how do I control the world, but what is the state of my inner climate? The Buddha called this island unto yourself, your own inner refuge, not the fragile shelter of control or prediction, but the stable ground of awareness. He taught, be a lamp unto yourself, be your own refuge, with no other as your refuge. This is not an instruction of isolation. It is an invitation to discover the only ground that cannot be taken from you,
the spacious, luminous mind that remains unshaken, even as the winds rise. Most people, unknowingly, outsource their peace. They hand it to circumstances, to approval, to routines, to expectations. And when the world doesn't comply, as it inevitably won't, they feel betrayed, as if peace is something stolen from them. But peace was never outside. It lives where it has always lived, within your response, within your seeing, within your stillness. Consider this: when a storm hits the sea, only the surface is disturbed. Below, in the deeper waters, there is calm. Your mind is the same. The thoughts and feelings may churn, but you are not only the surface, you are also the depth. You are the place beneath the waves, untouched, vast, quiet. This is not a spiritual ideal. It is a reality waiting to be reclaimed. And it begins, not by rearranging the world, but by softening your inner reactions to it. There's a Zen image of a mirror. The awakened mind is like a mirror that reflects all things without clinging to them. Joy passes, reflected. Sadness passes, reflected. Anger rises, reflected. But the mirror itself remains untouched. It does not hold on. It does not judge. It simply shines. To cultivate this mirror mind is not to become detached or numb. It is to be fully engaged, but not enslaved. To be intimate with life, but no longer defined by every rise and fall. When your inner climate is rooted in mindfulness, compassion, and clarity, even chaos becomes workable. Even pain becomes a teacher. The drama of life continues, but you are no longer pulled into every scene. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to act from stillness rather than impulse. This is why the Buddha placed so much emphasis on training the mind. He said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought." The mind is everything. If your mind is clouded with judgment, with craving, with fear, the most peaceful day will feel tense. But if your mind is clear, open, and present, even difficulty becomes bearable, even beautiful. The world will continue to be what it is: imperfect, surprising, wondrous, heartbreaking. But your refuge is not in controlling that dance. It is in meeting it from a place of steady awareness. This awareness does not eliminate pain, but it makes pain safe to feel. It does not erase confusion, but it allows confusion to pass through without defining you. And most importantly, it reminds you that you are not helpless. You are not tossed about by life. You are the one who sees, the one who feels, the one who can choose to breathe, to pause, to return to the anchor within. So perhaps the real spiritual maturity is not about floating above life, but about being so deeply rooted that even when the winds howl, you remain present, breathing, awake. And if today the outer world feels too much, the noise, the demands, the uncertainty, then perhaps it is time to turn inward, to sit quietly, to listen for the still small center within you that has never been touched by the storm. Ask yourself, is my peace dependent on the world being calm? Or can I find a calm that is deeper than the world? Because when you stop waiting for the weather to change, you may finally remember you are the sky. The rest is just passing weather. Part 15. Real growth begins in stillness, not striving. We are often taught to grow by striving to reach further, do more, fix faster. We measure progress in speed, transformation in effort. But in the quiet wisdom of the Dharma, growth is not born from striving. It blossoms in stillness, not in what we chase, but in what we allow. The Buddha's own awakening did not happen in motion. It came after years of austerity, renunciation, and extreme effort, all of which failed to deliver liberation. And so he stopped. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree,
Not to become, but to be, breathing, feeling, watching. And in that stillness, he woke up. Stillness is often misunderstood. We think of it as passivity, as giving up. But true stillness is a sacred receptivity, a quiet allowing of life to reveal itself without force. It is the pause between thoughts, the space between breaths, the silence between the notes of our doing. In this space, we begin to see with clarity, to feel with honesty, to grow, not by will but by wisdom. In the Dhammapada, it is said, the wise one, calm and centered, like a deep lake, is not stirred by the wind. This is the essence of spiritual maturity, not to become someone better, but to become more deeply who you already are. Once the wind of striving settles, growth that begins in self-judgment is unstable. It is restless, urgent, always reaching for a version of yourself that you haven't yet earned. But growth that begins in stillness, in the willingness to meet yourself as you are, right now, is different. It is rooted, it is gentle, it is inevitable, like the blooming of a flower that no longer resists its season. This kind of transformation is not visible to the outside world. It happens quietly. You begin to react less. You speak more slowly. You listen more fully. You breathe more deeply. And somewhere inside, a subtle knowing takes root. I am already enough. I am already becoming. There's a story from the Zen tradition of a student who asked the master, "How can I attain enlightenment?" The master replied, "You cannot attain it, but you can stop interfering with it." The student, puzzled, asked, "How do I stop interfering?" And the master said, "Sit, breathe, watch, let yourself unfold." We often treat ourselves like problems to be solved, constantly editing, adjusting, correcting. But you are not a puzzle, you are a garden. And the most beautiful gardens do not grow through force. They grow through care, sunlight, space, and time. Stillness is the water of that inner garden. It nourishes, it softens, it reveals what has been buried. And yes, at first, what it reveals might be discomfort, old pain, hidden grief. But beneath all of that is something more ancient than your wounds, your original nature, still, clear, and whole. When you practice stillness, you learn that healing does not come from escaping discomfort. It comes from holding discomfort in the light of your awareness until it no longer hides. You learn that wisdom does not come from books alone, but from listening deeply to the truth of your own experience. So, if you are weary of striving, if your heart is tired of self-improvement, and your mind is aching from all the doing, perhaps now is the time to stop. Not to give up, but to return, to sit, to listen, to become available to what is already unfolding within you. Growth is not a race. Awakening is not a finish line. It is a deepening, a softening, a remembering. You don't have to become more. You have to become still enough to notice that you already are. And in that noticing, you may find that what you've been chasing was never far. It was just waiting for you to slow down, open your hands, and say, "I'm ready now. I'm here. I'm listening." So I ask you, not with urgency, but with tenderness, what might begin to grow in you if you finally gave it space to root in stillness? Thank you for walking through this 15-part journey of applied Buddhist wisdom. May these reflections become seeds of stillness in your own life, blooming quietly, yet endlessly. Do you remember that quiet heaviness we spoke of, the invisible weight pressing on the heart? It might still be there, but maybe, just maybe, it feels a little softer now, as if the storm didn't vanish. But you've stopped standing in the wind. You've stepped into the stillness behind it. And somewhere in this stillness, I just noticed something, a realization that didn't arrive with fanfare,
but with a whisper. Maybe peace isn't something we earn. Maybe it's something we remember when we stop trying so hard to become and simply allow ourselves to be. Because the truth is, some days you won't know how to heal. You'll carry grief without words. You'll ache in places no one sees. But even in that silence, you are not broken. You are just unfolding. So breathe like the earth breathes after rain. Let yourself be soft, not because life is gentle, but because your soul deserves gentleness. And if something in this journey has stirred something true in you, let it ripple outward, not as a lesson, not as a doctrine, but as a quiet gift, passed hand to hand, heart to heart. Share this with someone who might need a patch of light today, not because you should, but because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind another soul, you're not alone in the storm.